Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me on the Royal House of Ra. Uh, I am your host, Amin Hotep Kufu El Ra, and today's show is episode 11, Dynasty 5. We're going to be discussing about the pharaohs of the fifth dynasty. And it's about a good eight pharaohs of this dynasty, and we're going to go into detail about these pharaohs. I'd like to thank those who tuned into the show, the last show, which was episode 10, which we had discussed Dynasty 4, the last parts of Dynasty 4. Um, I do want to say this. For those who want to write a comment, you can write a comment and express either your likes or dislike, or if you want to see things, hear about certain areas of ancient Kemet, please let me know. Right now, I'm going through the dynastic series. Um, Also, please do not feel, please subscribe and like. It's free. You're not even paying any money to do that because this shows that you give support to the show, and I would greatly thank you if you do so. But let's go into the show now. We're going to talk about the pharaohs of this dynasty. Before I go into that, let me do this. Let me show you. These are the names of the pharaohs of the fifth dynasty and their cartouche. Down here, you can see a portrait of Pharaoh uh, Userkaf. You can see two statues of him, one with the red crown and one with the Nim's crown. And this was in, these statues are in the Cairo Museum. And then here you see the pyramid, the sun pyramid on this page. Okay, this is at Abi Gorom. All right, so let's get into this. Now, the fifth dynasty started in 2498 BC and it ended in 2345 BC. Okay. Now, the first pharaoh of the fifth dynasty was Userkaf, who reigned in 2498 BC to 2491 BC. All right, so let's go into that. Excuse me. The origins of the kings of the fifth dynasty are recounted in the Westcar papyrus, which is preserved in the Berlin Museum, probably written down during the Hyksos period around 1600 BC. It seems to have been composed in the 12th dynasty over 500 years after the events it describes, and endeavors to give a reason for the change of kings that led to the founding of the fifth dynasty. Essentially, the text consists of series of stories told by one Djedkare, a magician, or possibly lector priest at the court of Khufu. As part of one of the stories, Djedkare mentioned that three children, as yet unborn to the lady Radijit, wife of the high priest of Re at Hierapolis, will become kings. He hastened to assure Khufu, however, that his son and grandson, Khafre and Menkauhor, will rule before this happens. Details are given of how the important goddess Isis, Netheris, and Mix, Hotnet, and Heket, with the creator god Khamun, Khanum, acting as their attendant, assists Rehat Djedkare and in her labor. The firstborn was Userkaf, a child 1 cubit long, whose bones were firm, the covering of whose limbs was of gold, and whose headdress was of real lapis lazuli. The next two children, Sahure and Neferirkare, were both of similar form. Despite the Hecatompynes origins of the dynasty, Menethil maintained that it stemmed from Elephantine, which is difficult to reconcile with the few known facts. Userkaf was in fact the grandson of Djedkare, the short-lived successor of Khufu. His mother was Queen Neferhotep. His father is unknown, and he married Karen Takakas, daughter of Menkauhor. Thus, by the marriage, the two lines of descent from Khufu were once more united. It has been suggested that the name Rewat Dachet was a synonym for Kahinwataris, which would mean that there was not so great a change in the ruling royal line as much at first be thought. So basically, the dynasties of Dynasty 5 and Dynasty 4 had a relationship bloodline connection because, as it stated, that the first pharaoh of the fifth dynasty, which was uh, Userkaf, he was the grandson of Khufu, which had stated, well, actually, he was the grandson of Djedkare, who was the last, one of the last, I wouldn't say he was the last pharaoh. I can give you the insights on this immediately. He was the first pharaoh of the fourth dynasty. So, okay, now let's get into this. Rejecting the traditions established by their fourth dynasty predecessors of building at Giza, the fifth dynasty kings moved the site of their funerary monuments south, first to Saqqara, where Userkaf built his pyramid just outside the northeast corner of Doja's enclosure wall. Uniquely, its mortuary temple is located on the south side of the pyramid instead of the usual east, possibly because the ground was too difficult on the east. Considering, however, the supreme importance according to the sun cult by Userkaf and his fifth dynasty successors, the Sun Kings, a more likely explanation might be that on the south side of the pyramid, the temple would be bathed in the sun's rays throughout the day. Surviving fragments from the reliefs that decorated the temple walls show the high quality of the sculpture, especially in the depiction of bird life. The impressive and much larger than life size pink granite head of Userkaf, opposite wearing the nun's headdress found in the temple courtyard, is still the largest surviving Old Kingdom portrait head, if one excludes the Sphinx. The whole complex is terribly ruined and the interior of the pyramid inaccessible. The solar temple of Abu Ghurab. Further south at Abu Ghurab, Yusuf built the first of the eventual five sun temples or sanctuaries that were to become a feature of the architecture of the early 5th dynasty kings. At this remote spot in the desert, the king constructed a sturdy podium of mud brick and limestone with a obelisk, the Benban, forerunner of the more lofty obelisks of the new kingdom. In front of the obelisk podium was a sun altar, which was later to become a feature of Akhenaten's apparently innovative temple to the Atum, 14th century BC. A crossway led northwest to the Valley Temple, and to the south was a boat of Re constructed of mud brick. It was from the Valley Temple that the other fine portrait's head of Userkaf was recovered, this time in Skimis and showing him wearing the red crown. Only slightly to the northwest of Userkaf's Sun Temple is successors proceeded to erect theirs in a row, likely remains of these other than mounds with scattered stone blocks on the desert face. From Sahure to Djedkare, Isasi, slightly further south, lie the pyramid complexes of Neferirkare and Niuserre and Sahure, of which the last is the largest and the best preserved. Okay, before I go on, I want to show you this. These are details of Sahure from a Danyet statue where he is seated beside the standing personification of the Coptos Nome Metropolitan Museum in New York. And then also you can see the pyramid text when Gaston Pere entered the pyramid of King Yunus in 1881. He found long columns of hieroglyphics, which is the Metanetu, inscriptions covering the walls known as the pyramid text. These comprise of 228 spell designs to help the soul of the deceased on its journey in the next world, some of which may have been recited during the burial ceremony. Yunus' pyramid was the first to feature such texts, but the tradition was quickly established to become the norm in the next dynasty. So let me show you that text and the statue of Sahure in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. This is the statue of Sahure. and this is the inscriptions. Okay. Okay, like the other Fifth Dynasty pyramids, the pyramid of Sahure, the second ruler of the dynasty, it is itself a rough rumble mound, but its mortuary temple on the east face is still discernible and preserves stairs that led to the roof or a second story. A feature of the temple architecture is the splendidly carved red granite date palm columns and the bold and deeply incised hieroglyphics Menenetu of the king's name and titulary on huge granite blocks. The walls were highly decorated with finely carved scenes of conquest, hunting, expeditions, all now sadly wrecked and largely disappeared except for odd fragments preserved in museums. Reconstructions of the pyramids produced by German team who excavated here under Ludwig Boxer give a good impression of the area's former grandeur with long causeways stretching down to the valley temples at the edge of the cultivation. The reliefs in Abusir mortuary temples offer some of the earliest pictorial evidence of trade beyond the Nile Valley. In Sahure's complex, great ships are illustrated with commetans and Asiatics on board. These are thought to be part of a trading fleet returning from the port of Bobulus in the Lebanon, with the great cedar trees that were to become a major feature in later temple building. Okay, so this what they are saying here, as Kemet was trading with those from the Asiatic nations like Lebanon and excuse me, Hexos, around that area. They were doing, they were trading and stuff. That then they had fleets, which we have today, merchant marine fleets, where you see the big cargo ships that have goods coming from other nations. The same that was going on in that period during Kemet. Okay, there is certainly evidence from the Lebanon of the present there of Fifth Dynasty kings, including fragments of stone vessels bearing their cartouche and the name of Sahure on a piece of thin gold furniture fitting from the Dorak treasure in Turkey. So actually, they traded all the way to Turkey. So trade was a viable commerce of that time as it is today. Widespread trading and expeditions to the south and further into the Near East appear to increase during the next dynasty, but this may simply reflect the better preserved records and accounts of the later period. An innovation in this dynasty under the third king, Neferirkare, was the use of a second cartouche. This contained the name Kakai, which may have been his birth name. Thereafter, most kings seem to have had a second cartouche, but not all are known. It is from the mortuary temple of Neferefre at Abusir that the earliest extant Hieratic scripture written in papyrus survive. A series of temple accounts, daily work rosters, and equipment lists. The return to Saqqara. The last kings of the dynasty moved back to Saqqara for their burial place. A small 80 feet, 24 meters heap of rubble marks the pyramid of the primogeniture ruler Djedkare Iasis. On the edge of the plateau, his mortuary temple, largely destroyed in the Second Intermediate Period, and then used as a burial ground in the 18th dynasty, lies nearby. It was only during excavations at the temple in 1946 that it became possible to identify the owner of the associated pyramid as Djedkare Isasi. Uh, Hirohito, there had been no indication of his name within the pyramid since all the blocks lining the walls of the uh, antechamber and burial chamber had been removed and the black basalt sarcophagus smashed. Fragments of the fine reliefs were found in the mortuary temple and also pieces of statues of foreign prisoners and various animals. The Queen's pyramid and attached mortuary temple were found to have similar fine decorations when they were discovered in the early 1950s. Okay, let me just have this. Okay, Yunus, the last king of the fifth dynasty was Yunus, whose rubble core pyramid lies just to the south of Dozier's um, Tymnos walls at Saqqara. Although largely ruined, it still preserved the basic pyramid complex with a valley temple at the desert edge from which a long causeway with a curious kink in it leads up to the east face of the mortuary temple and the north entrance to the pyramid. The pyramid was first entered in modern times by Gaston Maspero in 1881, when he found that for the first time the interior of the pyramid was decorated. The antechamber and most of the walls of the burial chamber were covered by long columns of text, the so-called pyramid text. A small section of the crossway leading up to Uranus pyramid has been restored to its full height with its roof closed save for a narrow light slit. The walls were covered with carved reliefs, more remnants of the mastable tombs of the nobles showing markets and bargaining in progress, ships in full sail, hunting in the desert, small uh, figments of desert life, and most interestingly, scenes of famine which presumably occurred during the rain. On the south side of the crossway are two huge stone lined boats pits, but whether they actually held wooden boats like that of Khufu or were just symbolic and debatable. The crossways was built over a number of earlier tombs and thus served to preserve them and their decorations. Unfortunately, little of their contents remains since the majority were robbed when the crossways was built, if not before. You know, I was always interested in knowing who was these grave robbers. Were they committing themselves, or later years when Kemet had collapsed as a nation, and then um, the expansion of the Muslim expansion into Kemet in 1636 to 1643 AD. Was the destruction of these pyramids was going on during this time? This is something that's interesting that we should find out about. Who was these grave robbers, and why did they have to conduct this massive destructions of these great burial sites? Um, let's go further on to this. On the outer casing of the south side of Yunus pyramid is an inscription recording the restoration of the pyramid, which had fallen into decay, and the restitution of the king's name. This was done in the 19th dynasty by Karim Waset, high priest of Memphis and one of the many sons of Ramses II, who predeceased him. He might be described as the first conservation archaeologist. Found scattered on the desert face, the inscriptions was restored and replaced high up on the pyramid in the late 1940s. It appears that Yunus left no heir, leading to a short period of political instability. This was apparently resolved, however, when Titi rose to the throne as the first ruler of the sixth dynasty. Okay, now let me show that pyramid text, because I did show you that pyramid text before, and this was when it was talking about Gaston Maspero, who discovered this pyramid text in 1881 and its descriptions. So uh, let me just show you that again. This is the pyramid text that it was talking about. Okay, now the last king of the fifth dynasty, which is Yunus, um, he had no heirs. So that was the end of that dynasty. And the beginning of the new dynasty was the pharaoh of the new dynasty, which was the sixth dynasty, was Titi the First. All right, so that is the end of today's show. Now we're going to go in episode 12 is going to be about the sixth dynasty, which the sixth dynasty started in 2345 BC to 2181 BC, and the pharaohs of the sixth dynasty was Titi, who ruled in 2345 BC to 2333 BC, and then Pepe the First, then Minrinre, and then Pepe the Second. Excuse me. So we're going to go into those pharaohs of the sixth dynasty. Then once we finish those, the sixth dynasty was the last dynasty of the Old Kingdom period and of the Pyramid Age. of ancient Kemet. Now, once we go into that, we're going to go into what they would call chaos and rebirth. And this would consist of the first intermediate period right after the Sixth Dynasty, that was from 2181 BC to 2040 BC. Then the Middle Kingdom period. Now, after the first intermediate period, you had the Middle Kingdom. Now, the Middle Kingdom period was from 2040 BC to 1782 BC. Then you had the second intermediate period, which was from 1782 BC to 1570 BC. And in that period, you had the various, you had the intermediate period, then you had the seventh and eighth dynasty, then you had the ninth and 10th dynasty, the Middle Kingdom, then you had the 11th dynasty, 12th dynasty, then you had the second intermediate period, then you had the 13th dynasty, the 14th, the 15th, 16th, and then the 17th dynasty, which was the last dynasty of the chaos and rebirth period. Okay, so we're going to go in this. There's a lot of pharaohs here, so we're going to do different episodes to cut this off. Now, please subscribe, click the notification button, and like. Thank you for joining me here on the Royal House of Ra. I am your host, Amenhotep Khufu El Ra, and stay tuned for Dynasty 6. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will be connected next time. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.